I've now been in New York for 48 hours or so, and I keep hearing about a bubble. No, not the nuclear bubble. It's the AI bubble. Is the AI bubble real or not? It has apparently been discovered that small cycles of companies, small little groups of companies can do a thing where one orders a couple $100 billion worth of things from another, and the other promises to give them the money. Anyway, there's this infinite money glitch that people are talking about all over Twitter over the last 5 or 6 days, and we keep hearing about more of these deals. There's a lot of people saying, yep, it's a bubble. Then there's other people who have switched over from saying, shut down nuclear, we don't need energy. They've switched over to saying AI is fake, don't build or save nuclear or other energy sources in order to run AI. The AI hype isn't real. The AI hype isn't coming. And look, the newest model doesn't do this one dumb thing that I figured out I could ask it to do. So I have a question for Philip. Roland Berger is one of the world's elite technical consultancies. Some of you may or may not have heard about it. Roland Berger has done some very important things for the, I would say the nuclear movement has been bolstered by some of the most interesting consulting projects Roland Berger has done. For example, many of us here are aware of the Lazard levelized cost of electricity figures, the ones that say that like solar is this expensive, wind is this expensive, and nuclear is this expensive, cited by everyone, infinitely digestible, and it shows that nuclear is not competitive and never will be. Well, Lazard was getting some complaints that these numbers weren't showing up when their clients actually tried to build and order specific solar from specific plants and specific wind from specific plants. And then they were finding that actually if you could buy the nuclear, it was actually cheaper. And they're like, what gives, Lazard? And Lazard said, aha, look at the fine print. It says you're not supposed to compare the different bars to see which one's more expensive. This was apparently not satisfactory, so a great urgent effort was made, and Roland Berger did one of the most extraordinary bits of work that I've ever seen, and that was to calculate the real, as implemented in real grids, cost of introducing certain amount more of wind or solar and testing that in a bunch of different ways and showing that actually the solar is up here when you actually have to use it, wind is up here when you actually have to use it, and nuclear, depending on whether we learn how to build or not, which Ashley Finan will talk to us about on this panel, is actually kind of competitive. So for all of you nuclear advocates, which are some of you, for example, who put on this thing, who have been suffering the Lazard tyranny for many years, Roland Berger is the extraordinary firm that is your friend. So, Philip, he's from Germany. I was trying not to mention that, but I just have. Philip is here because he's one of, and his team is, one of the foremost and trusted experts on a very important question that companies around the world are storming to his door and demanding answers to, which is the AI thing, specifically, is the power demand from AI, is it real or is it fake? Or somewhere in the middle, because there's a lot of voices with huge motivation to say the high answer and the low answer. So I realized that Philip was in a good place to tell me, because I want to know, if ChatGPT, whatever version or whatever's coming out, people are hyping this stuff up, is there actually going to be the energy demand and the usefulness from models that seems to be justifying the nuclear boom that a lot of us who love nuclear are counting on?
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks for having us. And I'll pass on, the compliments to my energy colleagues. But I'm really here to talk about, the massive transition that we're seeing towards AI models across various industries. And I'm here to tell you that this is more than real. And what my colleagues and my clients and the kind of work that I'm doing really are worried most about is, can we get the energy industry to find larger sources of competitive and reliable energy to put more energy on the grid or put more energy close to data centers so that we can continue to build out these AI models and what they can do. Not only for ChatGPT, I heard, there are students benefiting a lot. Please still read the books, okay? Just not only look at the models. But also for, the entire industrial supply chain depends so much on these kinds of services being available at a competitive price and at massive scale.
Okay, so
I just want to add, I'm burning 500 LinkedIn contacts in Germany for being here. So this is serious for us.
Hey, let's give a hand. thank you for your bravery. And I think that Germany, many of us here in this room have seen crazy things like restarts and rebirths of nuclear. And I think we're going to all probably fight together for a rebirth of Indian Point. So Indian Point is further decommissioned than many of the German reactors. There's a chance. Okay, moving on though. Seems to be this psych out game playing where, say, a big tech firm, you can fill in the blank, you know them all, they all come in a list. They'll say, we need all these data centers. We need a huge amount, a huge amount, a huge amount, a huge amount, and then people pour capital into all the different stages there, and they get in development, and then the tech companies are like, all right, we'll just withdraw a little, and they can kind of watch the prices crash. So you are helping people navigate this.
Right.
These are the sort of things that cause those of us, say, trying to build nuclear, we get kind of hyped up, and then we're like, oh, is it real? Is it hype up? You're telling me, you're asserting that your research and what your firm has found and what you advise clients is that this is real. Be prepared to actually develop these things. It will all come out in the wash. There's demand that's like significant, and we can bank on it and count on it in whatever states we're from, including New York.
Absolutely. I think, you can just compare it to many other fundamental technologies that have been invented in the tech and digital space over years. And they have come in these cycles. You might have heard about the Gartner hype cycle or something like that. And you can say, oh, this projection was off and that projection was off and so on. But whenever you look at the time cycles that we need to build a power plant, we came in on top of any projection that was in the market at that point in time. Think about the first talks about, how many iPhones Apple is going to produce. 10 million? Oh my God, they'll never be able to do that. Think about the first rates of, e-commerce penetration that we're going to have. 6% of retail? Oh, what a stretch, right? Think about the first ideas of cord cutting. Is really anyone going to do it? It is happening. These things are happening. They are real. And you can really, see the difference between hype topics and the kind of stuff that gets business owners, that gets customers, that gets, decision makers excited. And one of the biggest things that's important is you can see our future decision makers, like those students, already seeing the value. And you can see essentially decision makers in boardrooms saying, this must be fundamental for our companies. And you can see how this is being put into action. So am I bullish on the 6 months or the 12 months? Let's see. But am I bullish on the 5 years? For sure. This is going to be fundamental for the way how we organize our economy and how people are going to live, learn, transact, everything else.
Now, normally I'd push back and say, aha, did you hear? He's done that classic thing where he said, look at all these exponential trends that all included a reduction or barely changed amount of energy, or a minimization of energy use, even if you grow that, like chips getting smaller, they use less power. But now, I think from the energy side, we're in the weird moment where what you're talking is about the exponential demand increase is directly connected through AI and computing specifically to energy demand itself. So we've had the energy information singularity, I suppose, and that's what you're saying, and that's what you advise people.
Fantastic, absolutely. And you can see many other industries being able to piggyback on what technology has done. Think about logistics companies and e-commerce, right? You can say, oh, in energy, sure, e-commerce didn't have a big impact. But if you're a logistics company, if you understand how these things transform, just look at your favorite mall and, how it's, footfall has fallen over the last couple of years. And at the same time, if you're banking on, hey, I'm going to build distribution centers, hey, I'm going to think about, the metro traffic, and I'm going to solve these kinds of questions. This was a massive investment and a massive payout for these kinds of companies. And you can see these metrics also in AI, and you can see how people are moving into that field. So I think it is a fantastic moment and a fantastic opportunity in energy.
Right. So we're in it. If what we heard is correct, and I think it sounds right, intelligence may have been one of the bottlenecks for energy demand growth. Maybe yes, maybe some, maybe a little bit. Either way, once intelligence became something you could buy using energy, both started to swing up together. Now, what are we going to do to get that energy? Well, let's stay recursive if you're with me so far. Zachary, you are a lifer in regulation. You came out of the nuclear Navy as an enlisted sailor, and you have spent your life on some spectacular projects. I know I've embarrassed you with the first annual Best Name in Nuclear 2025 title, but let me say one more thing I'm really grateful about. When I went to my first my 5-year high school reunion, I liked the guy, but he was as smug as you get about solar in 2012. Ryan Pickering, you know the score here. And he was super smug, and he said, "I bet you by our next reunion, there's not going to be a new nuclear plant open, or new nuclear reactor open in America." And I'm like, "Oh man, it's tough. Maybe we should up the bet a little bit. That's really tough." And then he did, and we bet. And then guess what? Zachary and his team delivered WattsBar 2 for TVA. It came online in 2016, and when I found an even smarmier solar guy in 2017 at the next high school reunion, he's like, "Pay up," and I pull up IAEA database, and I'm like, "I'll take it in cash right now." So thank you, Zachary, for your incredible work. That TVA team and project is turning out to have a really long tail in nuclear tech, because the stars of that project, and I guess you're now going to be one of these, the stars of this project have gone on to do things like, lead Microsoft into nuclear. So understudied, underappreciated just how much Zachary and his team did by bringing on WattsBar 2, 2 or 3 decades after the start of the construction on a project left long dead. And it's an inspiration to those of us who see an extra rabbit out of the hat coming for restarting construction of long abandoned sites or rebuilding sites just north of us right now. So Zachary, you've actually been under the gun, where if you mess up the licensing, you destroy company results for a year and you probably end your career. It was your job to make the difference between, say, what the NRC demanded and what people terrified in your company demanded beyond the NRC, and your job was to figure out how to get the documents done, right? So once you got the documents done, there you go, you get to go. But when I was talking to Zachary, he said, no, licensing is a living thing, and suddenly I was enlightened. A living thing you go back to over and over. I think a lot of us thinking about, AI for licensing are thinking, oh, you have that initial license, you'll do it faster, and then you start to build. Zachary, you have almost a philosophical view you almost added about licensing. Tell us, as somebody who has kept nuclear going and gotten it added to the grid in a way that not many people here have, how do you see licensing, and why is it that you think AI is actually going to deliver a bottleneck against the claims of the people who say, oh, it'll add LLM hallucinations and will not be able to stand up in the test?
So, easy question. So just an important note, the construction permit for WattsBar Unit 2 predated my birth. So it was an interesting project to work on. And I can tell you right now, a few AI tools would have been excellent in helping reconcile the licensing basis between WattsBar Unit 1, the operating unit, and WattsBar Unit 2. That said, I think a little background and context is important to understand what we mean when we say using the AI solutions that exist today and modifying or creating new ones to help with the licensing process. Licensing is typically defined, I think, at the highest level as everything that occurs between the time that we decide we want to license a new technology or permit a new site or license a site, say COL, and the time that that document is issued by the regulator. And there are a number of things that are actually occurring under there. There are technical activities and programmatic activities that are being undertaken by subject matter experts for the purposes of site permitting. There's site-specific studies, there's environmental activities that are all occurring as well. And then on the top of that, there's the development of the licensing documentation that describes that. And then the second phase of that is the review of those documents by the regulator. I think the simplistic view of how that would occur, those sets of activities, and I call this the 3-bullet or the executive level slide that you would give, is sort of the source documents, or those technical and programmatic documents developed to support the licensing basis would be developed. We'd bring in some licensing staff. They would create the licensing document. They'd submit it to the regulator. A few questions would be asked, and then a license or a site permit or a COL would be issued, and inexplicably it costs a lot of money. The reality is that that's not really how it occurs, that before the application is submitted, it's a highly iterative process with a lot of bulk work. There's a lot of back and forth to get the application to look like it needs to support the review by the regulator prior to submittal. That includes supporting technical and programmatic documents, so engineering documents or other documents developed by other SMEs, so that they include the right information, because licensing documents only describe the underlying technical documents. And then once it's submitted, the regulator asks questions that frequently drive changes to all of the documents, the source documents and the licensing documents, et cetera. So this process is highly iterative, and maintaining the consistency between the documents, identifying the impact of those changes, and keeping track of the specific information that needs to be updated throughout the document, the statements of fact, tables, figures, et cetera, is a lot of administrative work, but it's done by subject matter experts. And we have a vision, a hypothesis, if you will, that we can develop an AI solution that would make that work a lot more efficient. It would still require validation, of course, on the part of subject matter experts, but it would move the work from bulk work and iterative activities to validation of the output of the solution. And we've been working with Microsoft directly to develop a specific solution to that, a generative AI solution that does this work specifically. So we're not talking about taking Claude or Grok and asking it enough questions to develop, licensing content. We're talking about having a solution that's specific to generate the deliverable that we need, that we're used to seeing, where we can validate source documentation versus the licensing documentation to support audits by the regulator, and then to drive updates to those documents whenever the underlying source documents change, and to do that consistently throughout all of those documents. And when there's something that's not right, to flag that for review by the subject matter experts in a manner that's much more efficient. And a little more context, one of the things we're focused on at Lucid Catalyst is a deployment model for manufactured or highly standardized reactors. And that would be multiple sites and multiple units, so that the solution becomes even more important at that point, to be able to replicate very similar site permits or site licenses using the same standard design, and only updating those for site-specific characteristics or site-specific analyses, and to be able to keep all of those things in sync. And we've been working on that model as well, to develop those site analyses based on available information today, and then updating those as more specific information becomes available. So there's a handful of uses, and we also see that growing in terms of applicability across more complicated activities, such as program development and engineering. Those are sort of phase 2 and 3 as we go forward.
I think it's fantastic, because here I was, under pressure to show that AI has use cases and applications outside of ChatGPT, and we're literally on the next question. And you can see how specific this can also happen in nuclear. And you can imagine that, these kinds of discussions and the fascinating work that's behind it is going to drive massive efficiencies. If you just think about, I'm assuming, how long the regulatory process is before you start building, and how much the rework is, because you figured out that not everything was correct when you had the documentation done, because there was some kind of human error. And you apply that not only to nuclear. I'm looking at similar cases in the automotive supply chain. I'm looking at similar cases in aerospace. I'm looking at similar cases in many, many industries. And that's precisely why this is real. And you can, just pressure test, essentially, Zach's ideas here and say, wait a minute, if this happens in nuclear, where else is this kind of technology a game changer for decision makers right now?
Okay, so you were looking for those use cases. You got an incredible one from nuclear, even though you're looking for the general demand signal and what's going to be. Meanwhile, I was concerned. I look out. Sorry, guys, I have a cold. I was looking out at this audience, a lot of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed students, and you're describing technology that I was worried was going to kill off all the careers of the budding Zachary Rads, where you have the regulation done by one or two experts. They can get so much done, but it sounds like what you're saying is, to the extent that regulation is slowing us down, you can have a lot more nuclear, and you might even have similar number of training experts just trained differently than before, or taught deeply how to use the models or what to know on the human level to trust. Because just commenting as somebody who has worked on, say, regulatory studies, I mean, I worked on it for a thesis, at some point, you have a conversation between very pointy-headed technical people on two sides, and there are these concentric rings of trust all the way out to the civil servant or whatever at the top of the regulator on one side. And on the other side, the executives who are claiming they may be far enough from the metal or the argument that they should have an understanding. A chief nuclear officer is certifying to somebody else above them and to a board that doesn't know the details that this matches, this is good, we can solve the dispute, we can get through it. But this is a model where you're saying that the iteration can go much faster. You can make a lot more nuclear, and you may need the same number of licensing experts, maybe trained differently than before, but you're doing way more nuclear licensing of it. And that the living update of the documents, or the updating one side to match the other, is something that can go much faster to get to the same results that's just as easy to understand looking at it and working backwards to confirm. Anyway, I'm just saying that today I really wanted to know what I thought about nuclear regulation with AI, not maybe by AI, but with AI. And in talking to Zachary and hearing his answer on the panel, I'm feeling pretty good about it, and I'm really excited, and I hope to follow up with you about it. Okay, so we've decided AI is real. We've decided that intelligence being unlocked by energy can have a recursive loop of intelligence being used to unlock energy. But now we have a big question, which is, all of that includes energy in the loop either level. We must provide the energy. We're all going to all the conferences all over the city saying energy, energy, energy. And yet we have mainly a few early, smaller prototypes under some kind of construction, and we have no gigawatt scale construction site active in this country. Ashley, you've now just come back from Idaho National Lab to the East Coast where you're from. What are you seeing? No, sorry, Columbia CGEP is one of the most influential climate and energy related think tanks in the world. It's something you hear the second you go online or the second you enter the professional energy space, and a lot of really good work comes out of there. And it's about balance. They balance the needs of all these competing forces trying to push one way or another, this goal, that goal, and CGEP sort of integrates this. And Ashley has been brought in as one of the nation's foremost nuclear experts to help them understand energy for AI. So we have a little bit of a problem. We have no gigawatt scale under construction. We have prototypes that may be excellent, or they may be like the performance of the other prototypes and may need some ripening time. You were telling me something about Vogtle. So Vogtle 3 and 4 are incredibly scary to finance people. I think we have finance people in this room. Vogtle 3 and 4 are really scary. Do you have any messages of hope from what went on at 3 and 4 for the finance people to say, no, we've got this, we're going to give it another go?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do. I think a lot of people see Vogtle as a cautionary tale. I can't say, yeah, we've got this, but we could get this, is where I'll get to. I see it really as an exemplary tale. You can, if you look closely at the Vogtle project, you can really see what happened and what we can do better and why we can do it better. For folks who aren't familiar with it, probably most people are, but it's a 2-unit Westinghouse AP1000 project in Georgia, 2.2 gigawatts. It was supposed to be $14 billion. It ended at $32 billion. It was supposed to take 8 years. It took 15 years. Objectively not good. But this is a project that really suffered the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, and it's almost a miracle that it's built. It's really thanks to the work of the Southern Company, Georgia PUC, the DOE Loan Programs Office, and a lot of others who came together to make it happen. But I see it as almost a miracle that it happened at all and didn't end up like other projects that were canceled. Whether it's a tragedy or an epic, I think that remains to be seen based on what happens next. But I find it really instructive to look at the players in the project to understand just how difficult it was to see this project through. And as you think about the project, think about, well, could another project go better? Could I do better at this if I were a development company? And I think we see
So what are your
development
top
companies-
recommendations? Go ahead. For everybody who's at a developed company, we have a great leveling. You're all going to get CJEP and Ashley Finance advice at one time. 2 or 3 things just for the crowd.
I mean, I really want to say something about the timeline. Can I do that? Okay. So in 06, there's a design certification for the technology. I'll run quickly through it, but Vogtle starts in 07. Shaw and Toshiba Westinghouse are managing this project. In 2009, they start site work. They lose 6 to 12 months already on issues with the nuclear grade fill. They go into this with an incomplete design. We know we can't do that. Everybody's heard that. But I think what I really take out of this is some of the changes in management and the instability of the management team and the EPC firm. So in 2011, I just want everyone to appreciate what went wrong for this project. 2011 is Fukushima. Okay, we have this big project going on and Fukushima happens. The regulator has to get things figured out. They lose a year or more over that. 2012, the parties start suing each other, and that's before in 2013, they pour their first nuclear grade concrete. So at this point, 2015 or so, CB&I buys Shaw, Chicago Bridge and Iron buys Shaw Group, who's helping run the project. CB&I wants out of this project. Okay, so we have instability in our management again. They end up selling Stone and Webster to Westinghouse. That's the old EPC firm that was part of Shaw Group. And then CB&I gets out. They add Fluor to the team, more instability in the management team here. 2016, Toshiba takes a $6.3 billion loss and has to sell off part of their chips business. This is not going well. In 2017, Westinghouse goes bankrupt. And then Southern Company takes over. They bid it out to Bechtel and Fluor. They select Bechtel. And now from 2017, you have Southern Company and Bechtel. And you stop losing so much schedule at this point, and everybody's read the reports. But you lose most of your time and most of your budget in the first 7 years of the, I guess 10 years of the project. Depends on how you count the start. And then now things go relatively smooth until COVID happens and they lose another year or 2. But this project suffered so many things. And we can talk about lessons learned. There are lessons learned on component manufacturing, on modular construction, the supply chain and things like that. But I think that the biggest thing to take away is that we learned a lot from this project and an enormous number of things went wrong. And there's every reason to think that it can be done well and that many of these things can be avoided with active and effective management and the right team and having that team hold together throughout the project. So from my perspective, Vogtle is, in part a cautionary tale and we learn a lot from it. But if we can implement the lessons learned, there's every reason to believe that we can predict some of those issues and not have them again. And I also think that AI for licensing is really exciting and it's a great application and can save millions and millions of dollars. But the billion-dollar question is, can you use AI to predict and address many of the bottlenecks and issues during construction?
And
that's
you're
what
on
I'm
team yes for that.
most excited about.
You think you're going to advise, okay, let's just be clear what's happening here. Ashley Finan comes back from, I don't know how far it is, thousands of miles away, helping run advanced reactor research or, test reactor work at INL. And we get her within a few short minutes of the big bankers on Wall Street. These are the people who are going to hear Roland Berger say, yep, it's real, not a bubble. And then they're going to see that we've done some things new because a lot of people are saying it's the regulation. If it's the regulation, they're telling Trump, if you just cut all the regulation or change all the regulation, we'll go faster then. And it sounds like you have a more measured approach that says, yes, we can go so much faster with our regulatory system without throwing the baby out with the bathwater and starting over. And then Ashley, you're basically saying, here are all the things that went wrong. So I don't know. I'm not in finance. There's a lot of finance people here, and you can tell me after the paddle that I was wrong. But I get a really strong feeling they're not going to let us build again till we can make a really long and very clear list of everything that went wrong and exactly point per point what we are already prepared to do and who we're prepared to do it and what tools we're prepared to do it in order to not have it happen again. And that feels really good to me, who wants to help build nuclear, to know that you're right here as an independent advisor just north. So anybody who visited here, anybody from New York agencies looking at nuclear, feel free to go right over to CJEP at Columbia and make sure you hear from somebody who's not herself right now in the industry. She's at a think tank famous for its balance and care, who said that nuclear was okay before it was easy to say that, and said it right here in New York before it was easy to say that. And I just feel comforted knowing that they're a little bit close to you and you can explain that to them. What you can also do if you're in the crowd, many of you paid to be here, if you want to recoup your ticket cost, write up her notes and use it as a deck and you'll be able to sell it for a consulting fee. That was one of the most complete and thorough answers I've ever heard on a panel. So thank you very much, Ashley. Okay, so we have a fairly complete picture answering some of the very biggest beefs that people have with going towards new nuclear, especially new big nuclear. So let's just start with you, Ashley, again. I would assume that there's some really smart people out there who are leaders and getting this message out. They've already heard it. I see some Southern people in the crowd. Where's Vogtle 5 and 6? Like, we have the demand. Let me flip this around. I was all optimistic. So you're saying we have the demand now, 5 and 6 years out. You're saying that we can go faster than ever, crank up the regulatory machine, deal with early site permits and especially super well-characterized sites and go forward really quickly. Ashley, you're saying, or at least you released to everybody here, you help provide this research for very important reports that I would imagine a lot of people in this room have read that summarize what you just said. So, where is it? Where's Vogtle 5? I'm not saying you're personally responsible, but can you help us figure out where Vogtle 5 and 6 or William States Lee or wherever there's a bunch of really well-characterized sites that need the lightest touch from Zachary Rad's new killer tool for regulation? Why haven't we started?
So, I mean, I'll be interested in the rest of the panel's thoughts on this, obviously, but what I said is I believe we can, and there's every reason to think that you can do a good project. There's not a technology problem, there's a project management problem. But we haven't proved that yet. And investors want that proved, right? So first of a kind risk is still there. And some of that will be inherent in any first of a kind project, but the government has a role potentially in helping to backstop some of that first of a kind risk. The Loan Programs Office is one tool that we have that's been very effective, but there's a lot of policy discussion about other tools that could help with this. I think that it's a difficult environment to look at new spending, and I'm interested in whether there are opportunities. I mean, we just saw the deal signed with the UK and was it Canada the other day. I think that's a huge opportunity. From my perspective, new money might have to come from big trade deals that invest in new infrastructure, because you can't ask an investor to be the first to move unless they're really bullish on this. And so I think there are still first of a kind risks that need to be addressed.
Got it. So it's not just like a message amplification problem where not enough people have gotten your view, Philip, from Roland Berger, and they should get in touch with you and get it. You're saying that we have not yet, with all these things coming together, there's still some active ingredient missing. And that's demonstrating you have a project management, the ability to control project schedule and prepare properly and have people that have done it before and can say, I did it, here's the plan, here's the mistakes, and here's our team. You're saying we're missing that, and until we prove we have it, we shouldn't be expecting to see the bulldozers moving for gigawatt scale nuclear.
Maybe we'll see a project signed any day, but if not, I think that's the missing piece.
Got it. Well, there's two simultaneous excellent nuclear events today. I was just at the other one and ran over, and Julie Kozaraki, one of the great nuclear experts who's really important, the Loans Program Office, was basically stamping her feet and slamming her hand and saying, people keep saying Vogtle was a cost overrun. problem. No, it was mainly a cost underestimation, a systematic project underestimation, something that specifically should never have cost as little as it did, but ended up costing much more than it should have because they didn't estimate and prepare and front end load the project properly. So if you wanted to attend 2 conferences at once, that was one of 2 or 3 key moments from over there. You get the best of both worlds, and I would like my commission from Nuclear New York for adding extra value. Okay, that's pretty good. So Zachary, let's say you get yanked off this stage and it's your job to crank up the new tools and the new perspectives on accelerating licensing. 2 things in this question. One is new tools on your side. The other is new thinking and aggressive approaches, including both sticking carrots from above for the NRC to go faster. Do you think we're going to see regulatory innovation unlock surprising projects that people either thought were left for dead or couldn't be done because we have too much new technology? Like, are you optimistic? You've been licensing pretty much like light water reactors your career. You've been under the gun at these giant, crucial light water reactor plants, but you're developing a tool that presumably you're intending can unlock non-light water reactors. Where do you see the most optimism for handling your part of the problem of why we're not building? What is going to come out of your tool if it is developed correctly and deployed by Microsoft correctly?
So I think it's important to recenter. What we're working on is a tool for the development, the efficient development of licensing documentation by the applicant, the verification of the content of that documentation by the applicant, and then the same validation and verification of that content by the regulator. So is the right content there? Does the content match the acceptance criteria of the guidance codes and standards? Or is there something suspect that needs to be validated or have further review by either the applicant before it's submitted or by the regulator during the acceptance review? What isn't changing is the amount of time that it takes to design and analyze something, to correct rework from poor design decisions, all of those things that underlie the work necessary to design a nuclear power plant that can then be described in the licensing documentation. And then to your question, it also doesn't make the regulator efficient outside of perhaps the acceptance review. So it won't help in that area. It will help the applicant efficiently respond to the regulator's request for information and the subsequent ripple effect that has on the design and the application. But it won't make the regulator fall back to its original mission of reasonable assurance. It won't put the ACRS back in its box and have it review the minimum information that is necessary by the AEC, which was part of one of the executive orders. But I do see that coming. I have hope there in that it takes a little shock and awe sometimes, and some of the executive orders that were recently issued stated just that. Reduce the scope of the ACRS work to the minimum necessary by the Act. It may require lawmaking to adjust some of this, but also to have some reasonable assurance when it comes to understanding risk, and this can help with certain things like regulatory, what we call ratcheting, but it's the regulatory creep whereby the design is changed to meet the demands of individual reviewers during the review, and you end up with a product, a licensing product that can be unbuildable.
That was an unbelievably measured and zero hype answer. I will probably be asking my colleagues to get a transcript of this printed out, and I will be reviewing it 3 times in a row on the way home. Same for the schedule, and same for your call from Roland Berger. I don't know. I think I achieved what I needed out of this panel. Presumably, you guys still have questions. I would love to see a few questions, make them, question-y questions, and you have an extraordinary resource. He will not be billing you for these questions. I think this is the right time to really get what you need from this panel. So please.
Sure. Emily Kunkel from Thornton Tomasetti. I agree with you that the AI boom is here, right? I think that's all real. Are we afraid that the nuclear boom is too far behind that where we're going to miss that boat? The schedule to implement all of this nuclear to host all of this AI early on.
Okay, that's two things. One is what's the nuclear response, and will the nuclear be there in time? But let's first say really quickly, how long is the bubble, or like where's the demand signal? And you may not be like the nuclear guy, but tell us what timing we have to hit to not miss AI.
Right. So it's true that we're building at an unprecedented pace. You may have seen that essentially there's more construction in data centers right now, or spent into data centers right now, than into office buildings in the US. So this is a massive, massive boom that's happening. Everyone in that space is looking for reliable, clean energy. No one in that space has reliable, clean energy at the speed that they would want it. So everyone is thinking, I'm going to build first. I'm going to have some kind of conventional solution right now. And I'm hoping that someone else essentially can get me out of that loop and really make those data centers
So
green.
build and substitute. In other words, you didn't say an
Absolutely.
exact year, just saying that the window is bigger than it might look like if
Yeah.
you're only looking at giant data center projects starting out. Okay, so if it's build and substitute, from what you're seeing, Ashley, you can call here, do you think we're going to put these missing ingredients together with the ones that we already have and be able to meet these, say, build and substitute over, let's bias about 3 extra years. If we're looking at power 7 years from now, do you think we can start in time and then deliver by 6, 7 if you were betting on this?
Yeah, I do. I think we have examples of that happening. We see Ontario Power Generation and TVA working with GE on the BWRX 300, and there's every reason to believe those will be done in that time frame. And that's just an example. There are lots of projects in the works that could meet that time frame.
All right, I've used up the time. I'm getting threatening glares from the Columbia students over there. I'm sorry, we'll have to take panel questions. I can do one more? One more? He's the guy to blame if we don't get to your questions. Memorize his face and mob him afterwards. I think this was the second hand I saw up. Sorry, we will talk afterwards and we'll get to it, but all right.
Anshul Gupta from New Yorkers for Clean Power. The question is for Philip. So in the bigger scheme of things, the large-scale language models and the regenerative models are sort of relatively new. You don't expect these models to be able to maintain or improve their performance using a lot less energy that they do and become more efficient over time. This is what literally happens with every new technology. It becomes more efficient over time.
No, absolutely. I totally bank on that. I totally bank on essentially both things happening. And what we believe is going to happen as these things become more accurate and more energy efficient, usage will continue to expand. Usage will continue to expand because you just heard this case, right, of this nuclear license. I have not imagined this nuclear licensing idea that Zach was presenting prior to meeting him, essentially just ahead of this panel. And I think it's great. And it just shows you the breadth and the wealth of innovation. We are not talking about AI as, hey, we can generate pictures now of, I don't know, yourself at your holiday location without having to travel there so you can impress your friends on Instagram. We're talking about real things, right? Speeding up the regulatory process, not only for nuclear plants, but right now I'm advising a client on hydropower. I'm advising clients on infrastructure projects. All of those have massive, massive benefits. And similar to what Zach is saying, all of those need very specific requirements, very specific models. This is not going to be, a ChatGPT. And these things are being built and they will consume energy. And if we have it more efficient and reliable and cheap, we're going to need more energy.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. And please, a big round of applause for our panelists.